Welcome to the webinar on TM Revolutions introducing TM repository. Although this is not the first webinar we do on the TM repository, this is the first one that we deliver after the product's been released, after 3 years of development and smoothing out the rough edges and things like that. Some of you might be familiar with the way software development goes, so this might not come as a surprise. Before we go any longer, I'd like to point out that TM repository is a translation memory management tool. We were encountering many people involved in translation, organizations doing translation or involved with some with translation to some degree, using translation memories, and we have encountered all kinds of challenges in managing translation memories. So this is why we thought and why we decided to create a tool that helps you keep your translation units, translation memories in order. But to be entirely honest to history, the idea of TM repository comes way before, from the times before MemoQ. The three founders of Kilgrave used to work for a language technology company that was not really involved with translation, but they had a lot of linguistic resources, and there we were actually creating a tool, an internal tool, to manage all sorts of linguistic resources like dictionaries, like corpora, term bases, parallel text, and so on. And little after that company started to deal with machine translation, we have came up with the idea of TM repository, not among many other things, because we wanted to find a way to manage the parallel text that go into training and testing the machine translation system. But then it was dormant. The idea was sleeping for a few years, and we started working on it in 2008 again. And this is how the TM repository, in the form you know it, came about. So I didn't know this was animated, but never mind. Now you should be able to see the whole slide here. This is the agenda of my presentation today. So first, I'd like to present you with the general idea and the benefits that TM repository is supposed to give an organization deploying it. And I've got a couple of focal points that are really crucial, really belong to the core idea of TM repository. My reason for this is that I know that some of you in the audience are already evaluating or about to start to evaluate the TM repository, and I want to give you some practical information too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about metadata, about the quality of translation memories and how this can be addressed using the TM repository. And I'm going to talk about the deployment, because the TM repository is a server product, a back-end product, a database product, and deploying, installing, so to say, a product like that is not the same as installing, for instance, MemoQ or any CAT tool or Microsoft Office, any software product that runs on your desktop. So that's a bit different. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm going to go into practicalities, and I'm going to give you a live demonstration. During that time, please feel free to type questions in the questions pane. I was about to say that you should feel free to interrupt me, but I'm going to be interrupted when I look at the questions pane, which is in another other display here, and see what you are asking. So, but let's get on with the content. So when we were actually thinking of and talking about translation memory management challenges, we made three basic observations. And the first one of those is a situation when translation memories are scattered in tiny files, where those files are not necessarily very tiny, but there could be thousands of them. And it gives the project manager, if we talk about an organization that is involved in translation, it gives the project manager a good deal of headache to be able to select the translation memory file or translation memory files to use with the upcoming projects. You might have to skim through a couple of files, even if you have tools like Expange or DT Search that help you might searching them together. But you still don't know which one is. For instance, if you have two versions of the same material, but one is reviewed, and the other is the content that came directly from the translator, and these two can be quite different in terms of quality, then you might have problems in selecting the good one. So when your translation memories are scattered in tiny files or tiny and separate resources, you might lose leverage. You might not find everything that you need for your translation. You might not find the right thing, the relevant thing that you need for your translation. The second observation was the situation when there's the Big Mama approach. We heard first we heard this expression from one of the founders of the MemoQ mailing list, but I don't remember who that was. Never mind. There's a big translation memory that holds all translation units that you work with, and from there you have to extract the relevant parts somehow. And with this, you might have the appropriate leverage here, but you will also have many irrelevant content, many irrelevant TUs, a lot of noise, so to say. And again, you have a problem somehow cutting out a project TM from all the TM resources you have. And our third observation was that the translation memory contents need regular cleanup, quality assurance, reviewing, editing, all sorts of these things, because there are outdated entries that are not in use, shouldn't be used anymore. There are bad translations, so to say, poor quality translations, and there could be other garbage like non-textual elements, like translation units consisting only of tags or only of numbers went into the database, and you want to get rid of those, and you need to clean this up. And you need to keep your resources consistent. And you need to know what you are doing to what part of your data. So all this could be very difficult. Now, these were the three basic observations that we have made, and during the development of the TM repository and during the beta period, and even now, we see that there are many more situations where TM management capabilities, TM management features are required. So there could be many more observations. There could be many more things that you might want to do with your TM translation memory data. And this is something that we either already know about or you want to hear about. But I'm going to return to that at the end of the presentation. So based on these observations, we have devised some sort of a functionality that could eliminate or at least alleviate these problems. And we decided to implement this functionality first. And this is what you see as the first version of the TM repository, which is a new product. And among commercially available products, the new product of its sort. So I have 4 items of functionality to talk about here. The first thing is that the TM repository maintains a single database. So what the TM repository is a single database, and it's not. And you might have, well, actually Hungarians in the audience, I wonder if there are any. There were some that signed up. Might have heard about a tale about one of the most famous kings of Hungary, who was still is famous for his fair conduct. And in that tale, this king puts a country girl to a test, that he should come to his court, and yet she shouldn't come to his court, and she must come on foot, and yet she mustn't come on foot, and she has to bring a lamb, yet she mustn't bring a lamb. So do one thing and the opposite. And I'm sure you also have fairy tales or folk tales of the same kind. And this is just what the TM repository is doing. It is a single database, yet it is not a single database, because there are many portions of it that can be retrieved, and these are not necessarily the original translation memories that went into it. So the main idea about the TM repository is metadata. In some translation memory systems, this is called descriptive fields. Like metadata actually means data about data. So you enter a whole lot of things about your translation units, like who translated it, when it was translated, what is the context, what is the type of the document, type and style of the document it comes from, what is the status of the translation, was it reviewed already, does it come from alignment, what is the name of the client the translation was done for, what is the subject field, and so on. So these are called metadata attributes in translation memory. And when you import a translation memory into TM repository database, you either process the metadata, the descriptive fields that are already in the translation memory, or you add those during the import. And you do it in such a way that in the end, in the database, you have a single consistent system of descriptive fields, regardless of what the original translation memories had. And you have an easy way to equip all your translation units with those metadata. And when you want to get out your data from the TM repository database, you issue a query using those descriptive fields, the values of those descriptive fields, and what you get is translation memory content. Currently, the TM repository eats TMX and emits TMX. So it's a standard way. I'm going to tell you why in a few minutes. The second functionality we devised is the way the dynamics of this database should work. Like, querying this database is just one side of the story, because a query is something that represents your project, because you want to create a project TM. You want to have the relevant and best quality translation units for your translation task, your translation project. And so you start your project with creating a query, and the query doesn't end here. The TM repository keeps the query, keeps the results set, keeps the content that came out of the query, and then you do your translation, or if the purpose of the query was not translation but quality assurance, like you want to edit this TM and review it and clean it up in a linguistic manner, then you can do it in a translation tool or a translation memory editor. What you get in the end of this action is another translation memory, a modified translation memory, that you can use to update your TM repository database. So this way, there's a circulation of data. You take out the data from the TM repository and update it with new or better data. The TM repository knows what to update and records the version history and knows what was updated and knows and always gives you the latest update. So even then you don't have to worry about losing the latest version, putting the file aside somewhere and then forgetting about it. TM repository doesn't let you to do that. Doesn't let you do that. And here comes my remark about tying the TM repository in with your other systems that you use in translation. To put it another way, the TM repository is a back end to your TM server. Well, this webinar was advertised to actually be intended for language service providers, but I don't want to restrict the content to them. But even then, I have to assume that you're interested in this webinar because you have to work on a large volume of translation jobs. You have to work with a large volume of translation memory data, and that you use or you plan to use or at least occasionally use a TM server. A server computer that has translation memories and maybe other things such as MemoQ server, to mention another Kilgrave product here. And when you have this setup, like you have the TM server and have the translators and reviewers and project managers work on it, then you put the TM repository behind all this, behind your TM server, to help you keep your translation memory assets in order, in good shape. And what the TM server does in this setup is that whenever a project TM is needed, it queries the TM repository, and when a translation task is done, it updates the TM repository. Currently, this happens through the import and export of TMX files, which has the disadvantage of having to be done manually, and has the advantage of being able to work with just about any translation memory server. TM repository database is very flexible about translation memory content. It eats TMX files just about in every flavor. It doesn't really care if it is well formed or valid or anything. But, and I'm going to tell you about this later on, the release of a integration interface is imminent, and the integration to MemoQ server is imminent. But I'm going to return to that later. So back to the functionalities here. So this is to put you into context, how you would use it in the translation environment. The third functionality is about version control. I mentioned that whenever you update the translation memory database, the earlier versions of the updated translation units are preserved, because an update can go wrong for many reasons. For instance, when you first import a translation memory, you might realize that you fitted it with the wrong metadata, and you don't want to run searches and replaces on the metadata, which is something that the TM repository allows you to do. You want to import it again. Then you can roll back the import. You can undo the import and start it over. But for instance, you can update a query with the wrong translation memory. You wanted to use, for instance, you wanted to use the translation memory with the reviewed content. yet you uploaded the direct output of the translator, which is not something you wanted to do. And then you can undo the update and attempt it again now with the appropriate TMX file. So this is what happens when you roll back. Either there remains nothing if it was the first version of the translation unit, or the earlier version is uncovered. Because otherwise, when you query the TM repository database, it always gives you the newest content. So you are simply unable to retrieve outdated content if there is a new version of the translation unit, or you can retrieve the version history if you wish. And there are other features that we actually managed to implement in this first version of the TM repository. One of those is consolidation. Consolidation is good for two things. One is that there is, suppose that you have the same material translated into two different target languages, like from English into German and from English into French, and you have two separate bilingual translation memories. Now you can import both of those into the TM repository and tell the system that you want this to become a multilingual resource. So in the end, you want translation units with 3 languages that contain English, German, and French text. Then we have implemented maintenance. You can find and replace metadata, find text. There is full text searching in the TM repository, despite the fact that the TM repository is not intended to do matching in the way the translation memory systems do. So it won't give you exact matches or fuzzy matches or anything. This is not the intended purpose of the TM repository. When you want to do this, you extract some part of the database, load it up in a translation memory system like a MemoQ server or the Trados server or whatever, and then let it do the fuzzy matching and exact matching. This is what they are good at. But then still, it is possible to do full text search in the TM repository to find about a certain term or a certain phrase that is in the database. So again, some specifications. We are going to go back to this at the come back to this at the end, where we talk about practicalities. TM repository is a backend database application with no direct connection to any translation memory system at the moment, but this is soon to change because in less than, we actually are in a bit of delay with that, but still it's weeks away. So the summer we'll see. End of the summer we'll see this operational. I believe that the integration interface is coming in less than 6 weeks, and the MemoQ integration is coming in less than 8 weeks. So it's quite imminent. It works with SQL Server, and it's a Windows-based server application, so it works with SQL Server, Internet Information Services, and ASP.NET. And it's quite scalable. So you can separate the tiers, but we will be returning to that when we talk about the IT part. Let's talk a bit about metadata in the TM repository, because it is really important that one of the focal points here is that you need to create a consistent system of metadata in the TM repository, and that's not about what is already in your translation memories. Translation memories are either well-equipped, well-fitted with metadata, descriptive fields, in other words, or they are not. And you cannot depend on that. So you need to ask a couple of questions and do a bit of thinking before actually deploying this database. So I was just talking about metadata because it's a central concept to the TM repository. I'm going to skip this part. It's data about data. It is also called descriptive fields or metadata fields, or well, in Trados and even in MemoQ you can have sort of system fields or default fields, and you can have custom fields that are text, dates, numbers, pick lists, all sorts of this. But you need to ask a couple of things. What are the metadata that you are already using consciously in your translation memories? Are there any? I think this question is completely legitimate here. But what metadata do you want or do you need to use in your translation memories to streamline your translation workflow? To be able to extract the most plausible implementation. And when you think about metadata, you don't want to think about data that need research to put into the content. You need to think of things that are obvious for humans but less obvious for the computers, and these need to be explicitly told to the system about each translation memory you are importing to the database. So and you might also want to educate your clients or vendors about this. So you are not very well off with all this metadata system that you have set up if you constantly receive content that do not have even the minimal set of metadata. And there's a lot of ways around this in TM repository, but still, if you educate your clients or vendors about metadata, about the descriptive information you want, and you help them include them, for instance, providing them with translation memory content, if need be, that already has this metadata, and getting them to use a tool that preserves these metadata fields, then you are much better off, because what you get back is much easier to import into the TM repository. Although in the TM repository we have prepared for all sorts of malformed content. So you need to plan. So this is why I was telling you that setting up and deploying TM repository is very different from installing a desktop application like Microsoft Office or Trados or MemoQ, whatever, because you need to plan this. When you are deploying a server, you always need to plan this. So first you need to find out what metadata you want to use. You might have to look at your translation memories. And you need to find out what metadata values you will be using, and you might need to set up what sorts of attributes you want to add to your translation units. Let me give you an example here. Suppose there are people working on translation units, originating translation units, and some of those people do translation, and these people have names, of course, and some of the people, another set of the people does reviewing, and some people might do translations and reviewing alike. So for instance, what we have set up in our test systems is that there is a metadata field that is actually, if you start off from TMX or you start off from Trados or MemoQ, is a system field, the name of the user that created a translation unit, and there's another system field, the name of the user that made the last change to the translation unit, and both comes from names. And these are two different attributes, but it has the same value set. And in TM repository, by default, it's called authors. So this is why these two boxes are different. And once you have set up your initial set of attributes, then you can import the TMX files, import the translation memories, presently at the form of TMX files. So this is one focal point that you might want to think of. The second part the second focal point of the TM repository is maintenance, updates, and versioning. And this is something where I claim we did important things. We implemented important features, but yet we still have a long way to go. So I can think of, well, at least 40 features to implement here. But this is something you just don't do with the version 1 of your software. Because in version 1 you need to get the core functionalities right. So again, there are questions you might ask yourself. How do you update translation memories in your translation workflow? How do you make sure that the content that comes from the reviewers are recycled into translation memories that you reuse in further translation tasks? This is something you either do consciously or you don't do consciously. This is something you have to ask yourself. How do you identify the translation memories that have reviewed or proofread content? Are you able to identify those? Are you able to distinguish between reviewed and unreviewed translation memories? And do you make effort, do you feel the need to post-process your translation memories? What do I mean by that? You know that there are problems in your translation memory, one of your translation memories, and you actually assign the translation memory to someone to edit it. Or you, for instance, all major quality assurance tools, including the one in MemoQ, have an option to run the QA tests on translation memories rather than on documents. So you take the translation memory. In relation to the TM repository, take your translation memory out of the TM repository, run the QA, make corrections, and load it back again. In that scenario, the TM repository will do two things for you. It will hide the earlier version, the uncorrected version, the incorrect version of the TUs from you. All further queries will return corrected versions of the TUs only. And the second thing it does for you is it can show you what the difference is between the edited and the unedited versions. So again, this is something you have to ask yourself. Not only the question that if you make effort, but the question is how you want to do that, if you feel the need to do that. Of course, there might be workflows where there is no need for this, but still it is something that you need to ask yourself. So, and in this respect, I return to the thought that a query is not a simple query in the TM repository. It represents a project. It always starts a project. You start your project with a query. You get it out from the TM repository in the form of a TMX file. You make changes to it, whatever way. You load it into a translation memory tool. You do translation with it. Then during translation, new translation units are added. Existing translation units are modified into translation memory, and you update or re-import a modified version into the TM repository database. And there's a term here, and in the second box in this slide, that says map and export. The export part is quite clear, I believe. But what does map mean? Map means that it's again about descriptive fields, metadata. The TM repository has its own set of metadata. You set it up in a way you saw best. But your translation tool, like Trados, whatever, MemoQ, Word Server, whatever, might require different descriptive fields, or might require them in a different form, might require them in a different name, for instance. In Trados, in Trados, you need to indicate the type of an attribute of a descriptive field in the name of the descriptive field, which is not done by TM repository or MemoQ. So mapping means that you convert the descriptive fields to a form, into a form that is consumable for your translation tool that you plan to use. And the good news here is that this is something you need to set up for the first time only. And then all that you need to do is select the translation tool in TM repository, and the mapping, conversion will be done automatically. So again, this is a feature to make the translation repository agnostic of translation tools, and making it, and this is something that makes it fit into virtually all sorts of translation environments. Here is an example of a TM repository preserving earlier versions. On the left-hand side, you can see version 2. On the right-hand side, you can see version 1. And the changes are, well, not on the text level, but the changed fields are highlighted. And there is about maintenance, there is another feature that maybe it's only me. Maybe it's something that I was obsessed about and nobody really cares about it, but I don't believe so. I was always assuming that translation memories have a lot of dead weight. They have a lot of translation units, a lot of segments that will not be used again, and that just occupy disk space, occupy your hard disk, and they don't do anything. So TM repository calculates the age of each entry. That means that it watches the time when it was last touched. Touching an entry means when you run a query and an entry, a translation unit gets exported from the TM repository database, that means it's touched. If it's modified, it is touched. But if there are entries that are not touched for 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, they become outdated, they become deprecated. And you can tell the TM repository, well, I say that all entries that were last touched before whatever, January 1st, 2009, should be deprecated. And then the deprecated entries can be deleted or turned into a query so you can even look at them. This is what the TM repository is doing about the supposed dead weight in translation memories, helps you measure it, and helps you get rid of it if you want. And now comes some practical information about deploying the TM repository, because it needs a bit of preparation. I was already mentioning that it's a server application. I'm not saying the same thing about installing desktop applications again. So it consists of 3 layers. If I want to launch myself into geek speak, it would be 3 tiers. This is what the IT literature tells you. There's a data tier, there's a middle tier, and there's a front tier. In the back of all this is a data store that is run by a database server, and it runs with Microsoft SQL Server, 32-bit or 64-bit versions. For those of you in the audience who work with technical issues, it is important to know that this part needs a lot of memory and processor power. So the data store is heavy on complexity. The database is rather complicated. And in the middle there is the so-called business logic, quote-unquote business logic. which needs some sort of Windows server with .NET 3.5 and Windows Connection Foundation and Communication Foundation, sorry. And this is the part that knows what to do with the data, how to carry out the commands issued by the user. And the green box is the front end, the user interface. Currently, the user interface exists in the form of a web page. So you need a server with a web server installed. But this is not the only way to communicate with TM repository. I was already mentioning the programmer's interface, and also the integration. Well, the first integration goes with MemoQ server. We are quite partial about our own products, so we are integrating them together. And I already mentioned, because some of you know that we are in a bit of a delay with that because of releasing MemoQ 5, but this is being worked on and will be duly released. And all this can be on a single computer or 3 different computers. So you can tailor your environment to your specific requirements. And there is no single setup that would fit the TM repository. But this is something that you need to give thought to. When you're deploying, I already mentioned that you should plan your metadata. You might need to prepare your content, because you might know information about the translation memories that are not there, and you might want to include them in the TMX files. And of course, you need to convert everything into TMX, because this is what the TM repository eats. When we were developing MemoQ, we decided that the only exchange format MemoQ recognizes, and the only format that is used to transfer translation memory content from one computer to another will be TMX. So we didn't start using proprietary binary or text formats instead of the standard, and we didn't try to, and we actually did have come a long way in encouraging our users, encouraging our customers to actually use TMX instead of the other formats, because this is something that practically all tools understand. And this is the case with the TM repository as well. And then you need to initially populate your database. And this is something I'm going to show you quite soon. But what you need to know about it, the TM repository, when you are loading a TMX file into the TM repository, it will discover all metadata, all these attributes, all descriptive fields in the translation memory file, and will attempt to match the attributes to the metadata that are already there in the database. And you need to set up sort of a matching between what was found in the translation memory and what is there in the database. And this could be quite work intensive, but only for the first time, because then when you set the mappings up for the first time, then you can save it to a template and then forget about it. So what we cannot believe is that you have translation memory files that all have different metadata in them. At least databases coming from translation memories coming from the same client are somewhat consistent. You might need to change one or two mappings, but not set up all when you import your TMX file into the database. Some practicalities, and then I'm launching myself into the demonstration. We have a release schedule. We have already released version 1. This is available for evaluation. Just write to sales@qgrade.com and request an evaluation of the TM repository. Because the licensing copy protection is not in place so far, we need you to sign a declaration that you won't distribute it and the setup package, and you will duly uninstall it if you decide not to purchase. And the API and MemoQ integration comes in August, and version 2, incorporating a lot of feedback coming from users, is due early next year. The licensing scheme, when it is in place in about a month, until then everybody is evaluating the enterprise edition. But you can have a smaller edition that is called standard and is limited in database size. In a very tricky way, it works with the SQL, Microsoft SQL Server Express only, that limits the database size. So it's not even TM repository that limits the database size. It's SQL Server. And to orient you in that, when I was doing performance testing on the TM repository, I imported the entire EU database that is something like 2 million TUs, but in 12 languages each. And that yielded, with all metadata and stuff, that yielded a 17 gigabyte database. So that is something that you can only use in the Enterprise Edition. And otherwise, because I didn't talk about performance, TM repository was tested with over 50 million TUs in a single database. So it wasn't tested with 1 billion TUs. Somebody asked me about that a couple of weeks ago, but I have never seen such a big database. So now comes the live demonstration. Just one word before you ask me about the pricing. Please turn to sales@qgrade.com, because I'm not entitled to give you like list prices, and for my knowledge, everybody will get a separate quotation at this point. The range is somewhere, it is somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 euros for the Enterprise Edition. So let me give you a live demonstration of all this. This is the web-based interface you see. I'm logging in as an admin. To make it entirely clear, the TM repository interface is not supposed to be used by translators. So this is something that administrators or project managers would access. They are the ones setting up the translation memories for a new translation project in a translation organization. And it launched me into the imports page already, because I was working on it before starting the webinar, but this is what it starts with. It gives you an overview of your database size. It haven't updated, because I have already maybe 1 hour ago I imported 5,000 entries. It updates every now and then. But here is where you can do full text search in the system, and there you get a result set. But this is not what I want to show you. I want to show you an import. Let me start a new import here. Browse for a TMX file. I'm going to, it's a bigger one. I don't want to use such a big one. Okay, these are all IT books I'm using, because this is content that my other company owns, so I don't have, and we have permission to use for research purposes, so I don't have problems showing them to you. And I move on. It's getting uploaded and parsed by the system. It's already parsed. So what you can see is that I didn't tell it anything. I just gave it, I just threw a TMX file at it, and then it determined the languages. It determined quite a number of attributes. Oh, sorry. And it mapped a good deal of metadata. This is on the TMX attribute column. This is what it found in the database in the TMX file, and this is what will be set up in the database. For the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to set up all the values here. This comes from MemoQ, which creates TMX files that are quite prolific in metadata. But I'm going to map the database data type. It comes from docx files, data type attribute. And I'm going to add a new item to the subject field attribute that I can use. Google development doesn't see it yet. Okay. It's already there. Okay, so problems are eliminated. I'm going to use the current date for the creation date for the sake of simplicity. I'm doing a lot of things for the sake of simplicity. And I'm going to save this in a import mapping template so that I don't have to do all this again. And then I move on. And here I can choose whether I want to add it or consolidate it, just add everything as a new translation unit, or I want to consolidate it with the existing content. It is good for two things. I believe I forgot to tell you the other thing that it's good for, the other benefit, is that if you have duplicate entries that you want to consolidate, this is also what you choose. It's not only for creating multilingual entries out of multiple bilingual entries, but you can also consolidate duplicates. I'm going to add it as new content, and it is not interactive in a way that you have this this status information here, but import is happening in the background, and you can do other things. You can queue up a lot of imports, and TM repository is capable of doing 2 imports at a time. And the rest is queued up and started automatically when a working thread is freed up. Okay, it is complete. Let me now do a query. I want to see those entries that were created through alignment and were not corrected ever since. Because this is something that the translation memory stores as a system field. So let me give you a query. I need to select some languages first. I'm going from English into Hungarian. I can select multiple target languages and have multilingual TMX files, translation memories coming out of a query. And then I want to see those where this descriptive field aligned equals yes. I have all sorts of options here, but this is for the sake of showing you quickly. And then I give a name, and then I can choose if I want to export the version history, I want to include the formatting. This is important. TM repository can give you the text with formatting tags, or without formatting tags. You want the text with formatting if you know what translation tool they are coming from, and you know that you will be using them in the same translation tool again. And you want it without the formatting if you know that it will be processed in a different translation tool, like it comes from Trados and will be processed by MemoQ or the other way around. So let me do the query. I'm not going to show you the export because time is running out. But I'm going to show you how to look at the results. I'm going to turn this into a maintenance session. It will render it in a friendly format for me, and then I can look at it. It shows me the content with formatting, but do not worry, because I can click this and see the details of the translation unit. And then I can get them out in a TMX file. I can update them and look at the version history. This is something I won't be able to show you. But this will have to wait for another webinar because I want to have time for the questions as well. So I'm going to cut the live demonstration short here. And I'm going to answer questions. So Anna-Lena Tilberg is asking, how many translation units did you test? 50 million translation units. There was one database that consisted of 100 million TUs, but I don't know about the test results. It should be handled okay. It all depends on the hard disk size and the memory installed in the server. So from a database point of view, it shouldn't be a problem. And what we really didn't test it with was 1 billion entries. And while I'm waiting for more questions, please ask. I give you one of the reasons why we released this product. Of course, we released this product to benefit those who want a TM management solution, but we also want to hear your story. I'm pretty confident that there are a lot of features missing. And if you write us about your TM management challenges, and you sign up for evaluating the TM repository, you might see your requirements implemented in version 2. So it is not entirely without a benefit to write us about the challenges. You write to, and I'm sorry, it's an outdated slide here, but I'm going to edit it and give you two email addresses. That is one. And I'm going to give you a web address where you can learn more about the TM repository. There are recorded webinars as well, but if you want to know more about the technicalities, it is best if you look directly at the online help system. Sorry, it is easier that way. Because that has a very detailed installation guide and a help page from each and every screen. The rest of it is still being, and some explanations. The how-to pages are still being written. I'm going to give you this without this parameter here. And this is something you need. And I'm going to give you a poll. I'm going to ask you one more question, because we are at the end here. It's about how you find the TM repository, if you have an opinion here. So I'm going to launch this poll. And I'd like you to answer in the next 1 minute, if you have an answer. And please feel free to ask if there are questions. So what is planned for the API is asked for by Antonio Rena. Well, if you mean it in terms of functionality, pretty much the API would pretty much support everything that can be done from the web-based user interface. You can import and export translation memory content. You can set up attributes. You can make configuration changes. You can update queries. You can query the status of queries. All kind of things. You can download reports and all sorts of this. If you are willing to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement with us, I'm happy to send over the specifications that are being implemented. The platform will be XML Web Services, or SOAP at the moment, but on demand we can give you the wrappers for other platforms as well. So it is intended to work with project management systems, workflow systems, and the like. Thank you for your replies to my poll. 82% have voted so far. If there are no more questions, I would like you to encourage to send questions to sales@kilgrey.com. They will most probably forward it to the senior sales staff and myself. I'm not a member of the sales staff, but I'm still answering a lot of TM repository related questions. Can I show the URL for help again? I'm sorry, I'm closing the poll. And you should be able to see the URL again. So it is http://help-en/index.html. So the dash is real. It's not automatic hyphenation there. So thank you very much again for your attention. There will be more technical training-like webinars in the future about the TM repository. I'm really looking forward to welcoming you on one or all of those. And I wish you a very nice day or a very nice afternoon, depending on the part of the world you're in at the moment. Thank you very much, and goodbye.